Hey everybody, Pastor Mike, just want to bring an encouraging word to you. The time we're in, new to all of us, and the enemy we face, this virus is really faceless, nameless, invisible, and it's obviously a time where we can begin to feel fearful and afraid, and that's quite understandable. It's an understandable emotion or state. Fear of the unknown is one of the greatest fears that I think anyone faces. The unseen is very challenging. Question is, though, will we give place to fear? If we begin to give place to fear, then it becomes a paralyzing force in our life. And I think that's one reason why the Bible speaks a lot about not being afraid, about fearing not. And it's because the battle with fear, we don't win in a day and we don't win it in a battle. The war is ongoing, and we really face that every day, or certainly in seasons of life. And so I believe that's one reason why the Word of God is replete with exhortation and teaching about not being afraid. And I was taken back to Psalm 91 again, and I was looking specifically at verse 5 and 6, but at the beginning it says, those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord, He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He's my God, I trust Him. For He will rescue you from every trap, protect you from every deadly disease. He will cover you with His feathers. He will shelter you with His wings. His faithful promises are your armor and your protection. Think about that. His promises are like armor and protection. He goes on to say in verse 5, do not be afraid of the terrors of night, nor the arrow that flies in the day. Do not dread the disease that stalks in darkness, nor the disaster that strikes at midday. And I begin to think about, well, why not fear those things? And if you drop down to verse 14, 15, he really lays it out to us and gives us reassurance. He says, because He, speaking of you, me, whoever, because He sets His love on me, God says, therefore I will save him. I will set him securely on high because he knows my name. He confidently trusts and relies on me, knowing I will never abandon him. No, never. He goes on to say in verse 15, He will call upon me and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble, and I will rescue him and honor him. With a life long lived, I will satisfy him, and I will let him see my salvation. So God calls us, and He says, if you will set your love on Him, if we will look to Him and rely on Him, He'll save us. He'll set us on high. He says He'll never abandon us. And when we call upon Him, He will answer. And one of the most striking things about this passage that really speaks to me is in verse 15, when He says, I will be with him in trouble. He doesn't say we won't have trouble, but He promises that I will be with him in trouble. You know, one of the greatest comforts I believe that we can experience is His presence. And I ran across just a terrific definition, if you will. It's a quote from Timothy Keller, who's a theologian and pastored in the Washington, D.C. area for years. And this is what he says. He says, the peace of God is not the absence of fear. It, in fact, is His presence. He's equating the peace of God directly to God's presence. That when we are in His presence, experience His presence, we experience the peace of God. And when I began to think about that, how God's presence triumphs over fear and brings peace to us, I thought of this passage in the book of Luke. And I'm going to read it in the Amplified Version. Luke, the 8th chapter, and the 22nd verse beginning, he says, "And now, on one of those days," and you know when anything starts like that, now on one of those days, I'm sure you've experienced one of those days. But it says on one of those days, Jesus and his disciples got into a boat, and he said to them, "Let's cross over to the other side of the lake." And so they set out. But as they were sailing, Jesus fell asleep. And a fierce gale wind swept down as if through a wind tunnel on the lake, and they began to be swamped and were in great danger. And they came to Jesus and woke him. He was at the back of the boat taking a nap. And they woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we are about to die." And he got up, rebuked the wind and the raging violent waves, and they ceased, and it became a calm, a perfect peacefulness. And Jesus said to them, "Where's your faith?" And I love what the Amplified says here, because it goes on to say, "Where's your confidence in me?" They were afraid and astonished, and saying to one another, "Who is this, that he commands even the winds and the sea, and they obey him?" You see, Jesus knew that there was going to be a bad storm when he said, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." He knew that they were going to encounter a storm. But still he said, "Let's go." But then he does the peculiar thing that he goes to the back of the boat and falls asleep. And finds his disciples frightened and waking him up, wondering if he even cared about them. You know, he calms the storm, but his real main point in all this was that direct question to them. Where's your faith? Where's your confidence in me? I love what the Passion Translation says. It says, "Why are you fearful? Have you lost your faith in me?" See, this is what I believe is really important in this passage. They lost sight of who was in the boat with them. They had watched him work miracles and do many things. Did they really think that Jesus, knowing, yeah, there'll be a storm, but still begins to take a nap, did they really think that Jesus was going to allow them to perish? He was there with them. You see, this wasn't a perfect storm. You know, there's a book and a movie about the perfect storm. Many of you probably watched the movie. This was a perfecting storm. Storms that we incur in life, they reveal things. And they create opportunities. And this was an opportunity for the disciples to have their faith and their trust in Jesus to be tested. Jesus sleeping in the midst of this storm should be a sign to us. And that sign being that in his presence, we can find peace, even when there's a storm raging about. Think about it, maybe not in a boat, or think about the times you've maybe been in a shelter, maybe your home, maybe an RV, camper, whatever, and it's night and a storm comes up and it's just raging, and you just slip down into your sleeping bag just a little more tight and just listen to what's going on outside, feeling safe and secure. You see, I read another quote about his presence from one of my favorite pastors, teachers, and that's Jack Hayford. He says, "When storms threaten, the presence of God is the answer." When storms threaten, The presence of God is the answer. You see, peace isn't the absence of storms, but it's God's presence in the midst of the storm. God really does care about us. And we have the ability to find him in the midst of the storms we find ourselves in. We have the ability to come to him and to even rest in him in the midst of the storm. We just need to recognize that his presence is with us. And if we're struggling to feel that, we take steps to engage him because he's there for us. He moves and he will calm storms. And we'll learn a lot about who he is. But bottom line, he longs to reveal himself to us in various settings of life, even the difficult times in life. He cares deeply for you, for me, for mankind. If we can find him in the midst of the storm, we'll find that he is enough, that his presence is enough for us. And I just want to encourage you. You've heard Pastor Steve talk about how important it is to set an appointment, really set a time. Discipline ourselves to get with God. And I've spoken to you about sheltering in place, about finding that secret, that hiding place, that place where you and God can get together and maybe put on a favorite worship song and just begin to worship him and listen. Quiet your heart and let his presence just begin to envelop you. You see, when storms come calling, we'll have opportunity to fear. And though we may not face things like we're facing right now, we'll have more and more opportunities in our lifetime. But my question to you is this: who's in your boat? Have you looked around the boat? Is Jesus in the boat with you? If you don't see him, he's there. You just need to recognize it. Jesus didn't send his disciples into that storm alone. And he doesn't expect us to endure or go through storms alone either. He wants to be right there in the boat with us. Really, none of us need to endure storms alone. So I just want to encourage you. Look around your boat. Make sure Jesus is in the boat with you. And let his presence bring peace, even though there's lots of unknowns and uncertainty. We can take great comfort and even find joy in the presence of God. I just want to let you know that Lori and I love you, and we really, really miss being in your presence. We long for the time that we can join in fellowship and share some hugs and some high fives and just love on one another physically. But it is a blessing to be able to speak with you, and we look forward to being in your presence. God bless.